Hi, welcome to another video on Jewish Charlotte Mason. My name is Bethany Mandel, and today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a curriculum that we're using next year called A Gentle Feast. As you can tell by the name of the channel, we follow the Charlotte Mason method of home education, and it's fairly complicated and not something that I can succinctly explain, but it's a philosophy that it was thought up by a woman named Charlotte Mason. She lived in England a very long time ago. And the basics of the philosophy are an emphasis on fine literature, fine art, fine music, basically all of the things that we've stopped learning, but we really shouldn't have. In the show notes in the comments below, I'm going to link to a couple of resources about things that I've written on my blog and things that other people have written much better than I have about who Charlotte Mason was and what her philosophy entailed. One of the biggest things was living books. So books that sort of stick with you a little bit. And I spoke about living books a little bit in a previous episode on Jewish anthologies, which was great, and you should go back and look at those videos. But for today, I wanted to sort of talk about how we came upon our curriculum choices for secular stuff. So we are a Jewish family, and that makes homeschooling a little complicated because most homeschool curriculums are written for Christians. And so we have to alter things, we have to add things, and it makes life a little bit more complicated. So I try the best that I can to keep things as uncomplicated as possible so that we can build and sub and subtract, then start everything from scratch, because I think that that's too complicated. And life is too complicated as it is. There's no need to add. So last year we used a different curriculum, and for a couple of reasons we decided not to stick with it. It felt like too much. It felt like we were doing too much, and we also just weren't a fan of a lot of the book choices. The books that we liked, I didn't love the history spine, and so I added the history spine from a company called Beautiful Feet Books, and they sell boxes of books, and they also sell these curriculum guides on how to implement the curriculum. I'm not, to be honest with you, a huge fan of the curriculum guide. They're super Christian. It's very project-based. It feels too contrived, but I loved the books that they chose. So this is the early American history for primary, basically grade like K or 1 through 3rd or 4th. And the books that they sent were fantastic. And so I bought the spine thinking, whatever, I'll get this in the package, I don't care. And if we use some stuff, we do, and if we don't, we don't. But the books alone make it worthwhile. So when we were trying to decide what to use this year, I already had all of these books, and I loved all of these books. And I had an idea of what worked for our family last year and what didn't. And so I sort of was going through all of the usual suspects of Charlotte Mason curriculums, and I had initially sort of glanced over A Gentle Feast because it felt too Christian. But I took a second glance, and I looked through the book list, and I noticed a little cross next to the Christian books, which is huge, because I was looking through the Ambleside Online list, which is another curriculum, and it's free, and it's fantastic, but I was looking through the Ambleside Online list, and like having to pre-read all of these books, scanning for Christian stuff is not fun. And so A Gentle Feast, she makes a little cross, and she makes a note, this is Christian. I'm like, great, we'll skip over that. Thank you very much. So that was a huge, like that little symbol saves a lot of time. So that was part of it. And then I looked through the book list and I realized like, oh wow, she has on her list a lot of books that we read and loved, but she has substitutions listed so that you can use something else. And the books that are on her list, a lot of them are in this, so we already own them. But it wasn't really that we already own them, but I knew that we were going to like them because I had already purchased them. So it was a pretty much guarantee that we were gonna like the books a lot better this year. One of the other nice things is she creates, every day that when you sign up for it, she sends out a video sort of introducing you to the Charlotte Mason method and to her curriculum, and it's a nice sort of introductory experience. And one of the things I really liked about the curriculum last year that we have this year is that she's really sort of made it possible to open and go in a lot of ways. So she publishes a few things, and I'll go through them with you today. This is one of the things that she sends out. So there's 4 cycles based on time periods. Last year, we basically covered cycle 1. So this year we're in our last curriculum, a lot of that content. And so we're gonna move on to cycle 2 next year. And so another really nice thing, especially as our kids get older, is everyone is learning the same time period, but you're just reading more complicated books. And there's a lot of overlap because you're studying the same time period. You can sit down and do art together. You can sit down and do music together. You can sit down and do poetry together. There's a lot of things that overlap because you're studying basically the same time period. Your first grader and your 9th grader can listen to the same poem. They can look at the same piece of art. So that it sort of makes it easier to group things together. Another thing that I liked is it's called a gentle feast. I like gentle. I don't want to drive ourselves crazy. So here's an example of week 27. So she lays it out, and you can see Form 1, which is younger grades, Form 2, 3, and 4. And so this is like 1st to 3rd, 3rd to 5th, 5th to 8th, and then like 9th to 12th. And so she has sort of listed out, like, this is what you do in history, this is what you do in geography, literature, and science, and then here, natural history, citizenship, language, Latin, math, singing, drawing time, and then anything other. So she's really listed out for you, and she also gives you sample schedules, which is also really nice. So you don't, it sort of takes the guesswork and out of how much time you need to be spending on each, and how to break things up. And this is just one of the things that comes with it. You should also buy the morning time guide, which I'll show you in a minute, but it's a substantial thing and pre-printed. It's beautiful. There's a lot of information in the beginning about how to teach things. So you can sit down and read it before you implement it. It's not, you're not being thrown into the deep end, which is nice. There is also for every cycle a morning time guide. So this is the morning time guide for cycle 2, which is what we're doing next year. This for us does need some editing. So you can see here, and then unfortunately the morning time guide doesn't have a little cross symbol, but it's not nearly, like, you don't have to read books. You just have to sort of look at the 4-line poem and be like, oh, there's mention of Jesus in there. I'm just gonna cut that out and find a new poem. So this is what the morning time looks like. And every day, so on day 1, she has you reading New Testament. We read the Parsha on Mondays instead. Tuesday, Old Testament. You can just read what she's listed there also. Day 3, Psalms. Day 4, Proverbs. You can read those. Day 5 is your choice. And so we're going to read about the month of like the Jewish month that we're in and the holidays that are surrounding it, and sort of do a little bit of Jewish year stuff on Fridays, or skip it, whatever, we'll see. So Bible memory is another thing. So I talked about recitation in a previous video. Basically, I think it's important to have things memorized, and having Bible verses memorized is powerful. We will do them in English because that's the language we speak. And I don't see a lot of value in memorizing it in Hebrew if my kids don't understand what they're saying. So in term 1 next year, we're gonna just be reading Devarim, part of chapter 6, and then next term we'll read the next part. And then there's something called a beauty loop. And so if you miss a day, it's a loop. So normally on Mondays you would do him. Obviously I have to switch that out. But if you miss that, then you do him on Tuesday instead. And you just sort of loop through and you go through this checklist of things to do. So I put arrows where we're doing them because we're in Form 1. We, instead of the hymn that she's listed, we're gonna do just a Jewish song instead. On Tuesdays, the poems are pretty much as is, and the poems are in this book, so open and go. Another one is picture and composer study. In cycle 1, because I previewed it, there was more Christian content in there. This cycle, there isn't as much. I'm okay with my kids seeing sort of, if we're studying Da Vinci and they see The Last Supper, great. It's a conversation. Like, I don't want to totally shield them from Christianity, but at the same time, if it's an artist that only paints Jesus, like, we're gonna study a Jewish artist that term instead. So you alternate between an artist that does sort of physical medium and composer. So every other week you do either artist or composer. And for the composer, just listen, which is great. And then she has fables and tales for Fridays. It just so happens that, this was one of the things that she chose a lot of books that we had already read. And one of the books on Friday that we were going to read, we had already read last year. And this was one of the books that we loved. So this was one of the things that like made me glad that we're using this curriculum, because all the books that we had already read were all the books that we loved. And all the books we didn't love are not listed. But this was one of the books we really loved. So I think I'm gonna end up reading this with my younger son who didn't do school last year. And then, but during morning time, we'll read out of some of the Jewish anthologies that I made a video about earlier. My favorite of those right now is Stories for Children by Isaac Bashevis Singer, and Stories One Jewish Generation Tells Another by Penina Schramm, I think is who wrote that one. And I'll link all of these books in the comments, in the show notes. So those are those two things. Another fun thing about this curriculum is also she has learning to read guides. So this is level 1. So I bought both levels because my daughter, we started learning to read last year, and it's been really slow going. So I wanted to preview level 1, and I think she's honestly beyond it, but I will use this with so I have 4 children. My oldest is 6, my second is 5, and my third is 3. Eventually my 3-year-old will be old enough to read, and so I think I'm gonna use this with him. My 5-year-old taught himself how to read when he was 3, so I'm not gonna have to teach reading a second time, so I got a freebie in there. But my older daughter has struggled a little bit with reading. I think a normal amount. I'm just totally spoiled by my son who taught himself how to read and who is reading at a 3rd grade level and going into kindergarten. So anyway, so I think I'm gonna use, she has level 2, just gentle lessons in how to read, and we'll do one of these a day. So these are just basically sound and copy work. And then this is the copy work, which is nice because the copy work actually goes with the material that they're learning, so it reinforces it. I'm a believer in copy work, but we hated copy work last year because it was really random, and I don't like random. I like everything to work together. And then there's sight words, and it comes with flashcards. And then it says for this lesson, review the flashcards from the last lesson, and then have your children read this story. And there's cute animation, and it's engaging. It's not the chore that reading was last year, and it was torture. So this is not torture, which is really nice. And it mixes things up a lot in sort of learning how to read. And it felt very repetitive in the program we were doing last year with our last curriculum, and this is not nearly as repetitive, which is really nice. So on the book list, I just wanted to show you a couple of the books that we are using for next year for history and science, just so you can kind of get an idea of the books that we will be reading. This is not all of them. So I have a couple recommendations for you of where to get books. So books like this, it's not easy to find unless you just go on Amazon. So this is one of our science books. So Beautiful Feet Books is where you can find some of these. There's another cool company. I like supporting small businesses and sort of family-owned businesses that are also homeschooling. And one of them is called Living Book Press. And they have a section on their website. And so it's a Charlotte Mason kind of a website. And they have listed in categories a gentle feast, cycle 1, cycle 2, cycle 3, cycle 4. Or if you follow another curriculum, they have Amplify Online or different sort of options, which is really nice. And that way you're supporting a small business. And he was this close to getting burned out of the wildfires in Australia last year. Another great place to find books is Better World Books. You can get books really cheaply there. And the nice thing is they donate a book when you buy a book. So you're doing some good with your money. So I'm pretty sure I got this there. And then another place that we got books, I'm trying to find one of the books that we got there. I don't have it in my lap. Another place is if you go to Mount Vernon you can buy this from Mount Vernon. So a lot of these cultural institutions, because of COVID, have really taken a financial hit. Monticello in Virginia, Mount Vernon in Virginia also, they had to be closed to visitors. And so buying books from their websites supports their work, and their work is so valuable. A lot of our history is getting toppled and erased right now. And they're doing really important work. And Monticello, I actually want to show you a couple of the books that I got at Monticello. One of the nice things about both of these cultural institutions is also they're not hiding from our past. They're actually great resources to teach our children about the past. And so I love I love the Gentle Feast book list, but I wanted to add to it a little bit. So this is one book that I got from Monticello's gift shop. And it came the next day. I didn't go to Monticello. You can do it online. It literally came the next day. So there's a couple of great books that I got just to sort of supplement for fun. We're going to go to Monticello this year, and we became members of Mount Vernon because of everything going on. And we're going to visit Monticello this year also. And so I wanted to get a book about Monticello. And this was another book that I got from Monticello, just trying to diversify a little bit. And one great resource that I super highly recommend, and I'm going to link this in the show notes, is a Facebook group called Living Books for Living People. If you want, one example is last year we were studying Native Americans, and I wanted folktales from Native American tribes. And I don't want my kids to just learn about other cultures and other races in the negative. So I don't want my kids to just think about racism or slavery when they see someone of color. I want them to sort of see people of color in everyday books and everyday stories. And with Native Americans, I didn't want them to just think about the bad stuff. I didn't want them to think about oppression. I want them to appreciate the richness of their culture. And so I wanted them to read folktales. And so I went into that Facebook group and asked people for recommendations. And probably our favorite book that we read last year was from that Facebook group. Joseph Bruhawk has a lot of options. Our two favorites were, I'll link them in the show notes, but it was like Something an Eagle and The Girl Who Something Thunder. I don't know, I'll link them in the bottom. But those were our two favorite books from last year about sort of in general about Native Americans and just in general. And those book suggestions came from that Facebook group. So if you want to diversify your book selections in any way, that group is where to go to ask questions about how to do that. And this was just another book that we got about Thomas Jefferson as well from Monticello. So those are two great options. Another thing that we loved last year, and what sort of drew me to using A Gentle Feast, was I didn't love the science stuff that we were doing. And so I decided to get Exploring Nature with Children. This is a nature-based curriculum that's science. It's basically a science curriculum. I printed this, by the way, at the Homeschool Printing Company. Super well done, much better done than Staples, and over half the price. Less than half is what I'm saying. So if if you know in advance that you need to print things like this, because they just send you the PDF. If you know in advance, it can take like 2 months for stuff to come during like high season, which is with the summer. So if you're not in a rush, it's a great, and again, it's a small business. They need to buy more printers, just saying. But anyway, so this is part of A Gentle Feast. This is the science. And one of the nice things about it is you can jump in and out. And so this is, for example, February week 2, and it's about earthworms. And like, I don't have to do February week 1. I can just jump into February week 2. And so you can sort of jump in and out, and it's really nice. And that's basically it. So as far as altering it for Jewish stuff, I add things in much more than I subtract. There's a couple things that we subtract, and I showed that to you mostly in morning time. None of the books in cycle 2 do we subtract. And I will add, I want to show you one actually fantastic book. So we are learning about, you can tell I'm not wearing a dress. I'm wearing leggings. This is what happens when you don't have an editor doing these videos. So one of the things we're studying is George Washington. And this is one of the books that we will be using, Hanukkah at Valley Forge, one of my favorite Jewish children's books. And I don't know if it's true necessarily. It's based on truthiness, but it's about George Washington walking in on a Jewish guy lighting a menorah at Valley Forge. And so it really sort of links in. So this is the kind of stuff that I add in. And Facebook group is great for suggestions like that. And that's basically it. We add in Parsha, and we'll do Chumash, which is totally separate from A Gentle Feast. But this was really just about A Gentle Feast. And that's it. And we'll add in math. We use Right Start Math. And we'll add in Chumash. And that's it. And then obviously we'll do Hebrew, which I'm going to be producing a whole other video about Hebrew in my Homeschool 101 video series about how you can teach Hebrew at home. But for now, that's basically it. I have an affiliate code for A Gentle Feast. It's listed in the show notes as well. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them on this video. Thank you so much for watching.